Hey everyone, welcome to the Profoto webinar. My name is Jared Platt and we're glad to have you here. Before we get started, we have some housekeeping issues, so we're going to roll through those. First off, welcome. Profoto is the host for this webinar, and so we talk about lighting because that's what they do. But we are going to give you a couple links so that you can ask further questions. For info on the Profoto B1 head, that's the B1 off-camera flash, and we'll be talking about that today. Go to profoto.com/B1. And then for any information about their light shaping tools, just change that / to products, and you'll get those. And then of course, if you have any questions about the B1 head, you'll find the frequently asked questions there on the / B1 website. Also, when you're watching this webinar, you've obviously found it because you're talking or you're listening to me, but that's at / live. But once this is finished, we will record it and it will be posted in a few days on the blog, which is profoto.com / blog. And that's where you'll be able to find it. You can also find it on their YouTube channel. If you are asking questions, our esteemed product specialist, Johan, is in Sweden, and he is taking your questions and queuing them up for us here on my iPad. So if you want to ask questions, please do that in the chat window, which is just to the right of the screen that you're watching this video in. Also, we want you to take a look at Profoto's Facebook page, and we want you to follow them on Twitter. So Facebook is / Profoto USA and also / Profoto. So there's two accounts there on Facebook. And then of course Twitter is at Profoto USA and at Profoto. So those are the places that you can follow Profoto. Our next webinar, funny, we're talking about the next one. We haven't even started this one. But the next webinar is also going to be on June 18th, same time. So we'll start at the same time, but it will be on June 18th. And we will be covering 2 light scenarios. Today we're talking about 1 light scenarios. Next month we will be talking about 2 light scenarios. Also, if you want to follow me, you can find me at jaredplatt.com. That is my blog, and that's kind of the central hub where you can find out what I'm doing. Also, you can join me on creativelive.com. I will be there on June 25th through the 27th. And then for those of you who are interested in doing a little traveling, or if you happen to be over in Europe, join me in Barcelona on October 6th through the 13th. So I will be there teaching a course, and we will actually be using some Profoto gear. So it'll be a fun course. It's a super great experience. So check that out at barcelonamasterclass.com. All right, on to a couple thank yous. First off, I want to thank Johnny, Paul, and Matt. They're the guys who are on cameras and on tech to make all this happen. So I want to thank them. Haley is the model that you'll see today, so I want to thank her and her mother. Today we have a very special behind-the-scenes experience for you because we literally took cameras on a real senior portrait photo shoot. And for those of you not in America, a senior portrait is when a girl is graduating or a guy is graduating from high school. They usually do a big photo shoot that they can put on announcements and things like that. So it's really about them and what they like to do. And so we're actually showing you behind the scenes on one of those. And thank you, Haley, for allowing us to do that on your photo shoot. And also we want to thank Profoto, obviously, for the amazing gear. Tether tools, you'll see all this stuff that holds up my laptop and keeps it from falling down. That's all Tether Tools equipment, so we appreciate them for making great gear as well. And then, of course, Triple Scoop Music, we want to thank them. All the music that you hear coming in and leaving this webinar will be Triple Scoop Music, and that's where I get my music to enhance my product. So that's all the thank yous out of the way. And now let's talk a little bit about what we're doing today on our webinar. We are going behind the scenes, as I said, to a senior portrait shoot. As a result of that, because we were focusing on the client, we're not going to, as we did last time, where you hear me talking on the video. I'm going to be talking over the video here live. So I'm going to be showing you the video, what occurred at the senior portrait, and I'm going to be talking over it and telling you about it, and then we're going to diagram what we were doing on that portrait shoot, and then we'll investigate and look at those images inside of Lightroom and compare the different images so that you get a sense of what we were doing. So that's the way our webinar will roll today. We are using one light and one light only on this portrait shoot. We're using a large softbox, we're using a telezoom reflector, and then we're going bare head just with the B1 head, and that's it. So those are the three ways we're going to use the light. But we're going to show you a lot of different ways that light can be used in a very simple way. So our goal is to be able to do this quickly with maybe one assistant, or everything that we did could also be done with a stand and maybe a sandbag to hold it if you're using the big softbox. So let's get right into it. Our first setup is going to be bare head. So we're going to start out with bare head, and we're going to show you a video of what we were shooting in there's this little overhang. And the place we are is the Japanese Friendship Gardens in Phoenix, Arizona. It's very beautiful. If you haven't been there and you're in this area, you should go check it out. They're perfectly happy to have professional shoots there. They have a fee for it. You just go in and pay the fee and you can do a professional shoot. So it's a fantastic place, but it's also a nice place to just hang around. But it's very covered. There's a lot of places where there's a lot of tree cover, which is nice for taking portraits. So we're going to start out in this kind of tree covered area. So let's go to that video. And if you can see that I've got the sun right behind her, kind of filtering through those trees. And pause that, Matt. What you're going to see is that when we shoot this with the bare head, scrub back so that they can see the full, right there. You can see that I'm off to the left a little bit. The sun is pretty much directly behind her. It's a little bit off to the right of her, but we've got Johnny over here holding the Profoto bare head B1 off-camera flash, and so that's barreling in on her just off to my right. And she has kind of been instructed to face that a little bit more rather than facing me. So we're going to go into our Lightroom here for a second. I'm going to show you a couple things. So when we first start, what we initially do is check our exposure. So we're checking the exposure for how it's going to look without the flash. So you can see that we've got the sun kind of coming in just off to her right a little bit. And then, but my biggest concern was her hair. So when I first exposed it in the camera, I thought that hair might blow out a little bit too much. And so I changed the exposure just a little bit and brought it down. So in this case, we were at 1/60th of a second at ISO 400. So we changed that just a little bit down to 320 so that her hair wouldn't quite blow out as much. It's still a little hot right there, but it's okay. So that was the initial change that we made. Once we started shooting, then I noticed that we had a lot of light spilling onto that tree because the B1 head, when you take this head and you fire it, it really has a lot of spread. I mean, it goes like this. So it's quite wide. It doesn't zoom in like this. It's quite wide. And so even though he was fairly close to that tree, it wasn't like he was, a long way away from the tree. It's spreading and hitting that, but it gives a very wide coverage of light. And so you have to be aware of that. And I didn't really want the tree in the shot, and I didn't want it, lit like that. And so instead, I changed lenses and went to a long lens. And so I'm at 140 millimeters there. So now I'm just looking at her and the background and the trees behind her and the light, that kind of thing. So my framing was dictated by the fact that we were using this light and it was spreading so much. We could have brought it closer to her, but it really spreads wide. And so you have to be aware of that when you're shooting. But I like a long portrait lens anyway, so I was happy with that. Now let me show you quickly what this setting or this looks like then. So as we look at this, the sun's here, and that's what's giving us our hair light. The tree is right here. That's a really bad looking tree, but see, that's a branch right there. So, so this is what's hitting here, and it's hitting her at the same time, and the camera is here. So that is your basic setup. And of course, we want to, whenever we're using a bare head or something very small like that, we want to make sure that the light is coming on axis. So her nose is right here. I'm going to draw a little blue nose on her, right, like that. So we want the light to be fairly equidistant between each side of her nose. So if it can be on axis, that's the best way to do it. Sometimes we'll put it a little off axis this way or this way, depending on what we want to do, but generally try and keep it right on her because it's going to create some pretty harsh shadows. Although I've found that the B1 head, because it's a sizable flash, it does a better job at softening those harsh shadows. It's not quite as harsh as, say, like a little speed light or something, because it's a bigger light source. Not much, but it's a little bit bigger. Okay, so when you look at these photos then, the final shot, I think, looks fairly nice. And this is the retouched final image here that we're sending to her. So we've removed blemishes and things like that. But it's a really nice shot. When we're exposing it, all that we did on this shot, and go ahead and play the video, it was very quick. All we did is we point the flash at her, we photograph her, I see the way the light is, and then I can change from the camera itself and just dial down the flash just a tad, maybe a third a stop, and that gives us the right amount of flash on her, and this is what we end up with. Now, we also use the bare head, and we'll go to that next video with the microphone. We also use the bare head in another kind of unconventional way. Sometimes a bare head going forward on someone is not necessarily the best use of that light, because in our circumstance, and you can see here on our diagram, this is our second shot, the sun is kind of behind the trees and just kind of coming across the trees. It's not really getting her all that much in the shot, and there's a bunch of trees here, and so we see a lot of sky behind, but behind me is a lot of open sky. And so that open sky is what's lighting her. So in this instance, what I did is I shot at ISO 640 so that the shade was bright enough that this forward sky was the big softbox that was lighting her. And so with a softbox as big as the sky lighting her, she has a nice even lighting on her face. And so now what I want to do is I want to create the feeling that there is some kind of a cross light coming across her, a little bit more sparkly in her hair and things like that. And so that becomes the B1 head in the background. And so we use the only flash we have as a hair light in this circumstance. So go ahead and play this video, and you're going to see in the video how we are, go ahead and run it. Watch this. See how Johnny is right there behind? And when we look at the final image, see that? You actually see the head in the shot. And then it's just a matter of going in and getting rid of that arm on the head. And this one's even easier because pause that one. We're looking directly into the B1 head. It's barreling straight on us. And so all we have to do is go in with Photoshop or Lightroom and remove that little post right there. And then we've got that look as though the sun is in the shot and coming forward, but the sun's not. The sun's actually over here to the right of the frame, and it's not even in the shot. And so we've created our own sun. And we can look at that right here in Lightroom. And let's just go to, here's without the head on. So there's no head on. See, you can see that the light is not flashing. And then if we flash the light, let me just put these side by side for you. If you flash the light, look at the difference between her. She's got a lot more. So without, let's go right here and look right about there. And then when we go here, we get, see that? She separates from the background a little bit better. She gets a little rim of light right there, helps to separate her from the background. Plus it creates that nice sparkly look of shooting into the sun. Another place where you can see that is in this set right here. So if you look at this one here, here's the shot, and we zoom into her. You see she looks nice all by herself, but then once we put that head in there, now you start to see light kind of cresting across her shoulder here. You see light kind of right here on her pants, creating more of a texture on her pants. So you get a lot more of a nice lighting condition when you have some kind of a strong backlight hair lighting her. And so that's what we were trying to accomplish with that B1 head as a background. And here's another example for you that wasn't shot on this photo shoot, but it's a great example. So this is in London, and in London at the time at least, there was no sun whatsoever. It was just an overcast day. And I needed sun in order to create something interesting. And so I've got a softbox just behind me and to my left, so you can see that there's kind of a general light source on her. So it's a small softbox off to my left and up high. And that's why you can see over here on her nose, you see the shadow right there on her nose. That's the telltale sign that we've got a softbox here. It's lighting across there. But look right over here. See that sun that's happening right there? That sun is not a real sun. That is a head, a bare head on a post sitting up right where the edge of the building is, right at the top of the rooftop and right to the edge of this chimney. There's a bare head sitting right there. And I'll show you that bare head. So let's just zoom in here. So it looks like our sun is peeking around the building, but when we go to the real shot, that's the post holding up the head. See that? So all we have to do is remove that post. All we have to do is remove the post, and then we end up with our final shot, which looks like the sun is cresting over the buildings. So that's a great way to use one light. This is obviously a two-light scenario, but in our senior portrait situation, we had a nice open sky that was lighting her from the front, and so all of this. So when you look at her, she looks fairly well lit. That's all from the sky, and then our head behind her is giving her a little bit more of a separation from the background. Okay, let's move on to our next example. So once we finished with our bare head, we decided to go to, where is it? Over here. We went to the telezoom, which is a kind of a deep reflector. You can see how deep that is. And it's very shiny. And this has the ability to throw light a long way. So it's very useful in circumstances where you can't get close enough to the subject and you need to throw some light. So this is what we were using on this. And we shot across. I'm going to give you the lay of the land here, and then we'll run the video. But we shoot across. This is all water here, and this is a bridge that the model is on. And then there's more water back here, and there's a bunch of trees. And this is the sun right here. But it's not actually peeking out. That's why I have the arrow down. It's actually behind these trees at this point. And so the light is coming strong through like the trees here, but the only real direct light on the model or on the trees is this sky coming across here, and you'll see that in the photos. And then we start out with our B1 head with the telezoom reflector on it over here as close as we can to on axis, but we're a long way away because we're across the water. So go ahead and roll that video so that we can show that. See how far away he is? He's got to shoot across that water to be on axis. And then I'm even further back from him, and I'm shooting, and then we're going to get that. Now pause on that, and you can see that when you're using such a small light source, and even though this is bigger, let's get a shot of the head. So even though this light source is much bigger than a bare head, because it's nice and round and large here, even though it's bigger than that bare head, when you move it far, far away from the subject, it becomes small in comparison to the subject. And so as a result of that, it's just a tiny light, and so it creates very harsh shadows. So what we needed to do then is we needed to put it on axis so that it wasn't creating a really harsh shadow on our nose. But if you look at the photo itself, and let's just go into Lightroom here. So if you look at the shadows themselves, let's just go to this. This is the shot with absolutely no light whatsoever. So you can see that I'm getting a nice soft light from the sky itself here. That's all skylight coming across. But once I add that telezoom to kind of give her a pop out and bring her out of the background, look at what I get on her legs. See that shadow right there? That's a very harsh shadow coming from that telezoom reflector. And so it's fine, it's a harsher look, and it does a good job at pulling her out of the background, so she's not as, like in this shot when we go, she kind of blends with the background a little bit more. And once we actually give her a little light, she pops out of the background and she gets some catch lights in her eyes, which are nice. But I prefer not to have harsh shadows like that on my subject or on the, around the subject. And because I can't get her further away from the bridge, I'm going to get those. So what we end up doing instead is we change the position on our light. Again, so in this case, what we ended up doing is we ended up removing the light here, and we put the light right here. Oops, there we go. So now the light is coming across this way. Johnny is hiding behind a tree right here, pushing the light this way. And as a result of that, I'm able to get this shot. So let's go back to Lightroom. And you can see the difference between the original shot. So I'm going to pull up all three of these shots. You can see the difference between the shots. If you look at the first shot, it's nice, evenly lit because of the sky, but she's kind of falling into the background. It's all kind of the same. So the next shot, we darken the background a little bit just by changing our ISO, and then we add a reflector, the telezoom reflector, and add some light, and we get this nice poppy light on her. So we get that direct light source on her, but we end up with some pretty tough shadows here. The next one, the final one, the one that I like, is the one where we separate her from the background, but what we're using the sky to light her forward. So all of this is skylight that's lighting her, but then we're separating her from the background with that telezoom, which is giving her that nice crest of light here. It's giving her a nice crest of light here on her leg. See that crest? That crest doesn't exist until you put that backlight on her. So sometimes the best use of a light, one light, is not going to be in front of your subject. It's actually going to be behind your subject or to the side of your subject or somewhere else. Because generally speaking, you can find some kind of open sky that will give you the front light that you need. And then it's just a matter of using the one light that you have to add the style in the photograph as opposed to trying to use it to do the major lighting. Now, that's not to say that that's the only course, because obviously we have softboxes and we have umbrellas and things like that will help shape that light. And when we shape the light, then it becomes advantageous to use the light as the main light source and to sculpt the light on the subject themselves. So that's what we'll go into next. So we're going to go to a softbox comparison at this point. So let me move this out of the way here. And we're going to go into our softbox. So this is a very large softbox. This is the softbox that we were using on location. And what we had on location was basically a monopod with the B1 head on it. You can see the B1 head fits right there. So we had a monopod holding this up, and so our assistant was simply holding the monopod and pointing it wherever we needed it to go. It's a very simple setup, but this is a very large softbox, so he had to be on that all the time. If you don't have an assistant with you, then it's just a matter of putting it on a stand and throwing a sandbag on it so that it won't fall over in the wind. And if it's really windy out, you might use a smaller softbox or a lot of sandbags. Okay, so in this case, I wanted to show you the difference between a grid and no grid. So go ahead and play the video just so we can see the difference between, you can see the grid on the softbox. That actually makes the light much more directional, and so you can see that there's a lot more shadow on her nose, and it creates a lot more shape to a face. It's more three-dimensional because it's very directional light. Even though it's very soft still, it's very directional. But then when we tear that grid off, then everything becomes much softer because the light is coming from every direction as opposed to from one single direction. The grid kind of makes it almost like there's a whole bunch of little lights rather than one big continuous light source. So I'm just going to show you a comparison between the two of these inside of Lightroom so you can see the difference between what happens in a gridded softbox versus a regular softbox with no grid on it. And so when you look at her face, this is where you see the difference. Right there on that nose is the best way to see the difference. You can see here, because the light is coming in more of a directional way, and the light on the left side of the softbox goes straight, and the light on the right side of the softbox goes straight, it doesn't wrap as much as it would if it were just a full softbox without a grid. If you look at this one, you can see that shadow is much softer, a much softer shadow because the light is wrapping more. And so if you look at this softbox then, you can see that light can come from, let's show the softbox here. So you can see that if I'm here, light can come from here and go this way, but it can also go that way, and it can also come from over here and go this way, and it can go straight. So this light is coming from every direction to every direction. But when you put a grid on it, then it's traveling more in a straight line. So you end up with much more three-dimensionality to a subject because you end up with a little harder shadows. But they're still very beautiful, soft shadows, but they're just more directional, and it creates a little bit harder shadows. So that's the difference. When you look at these two, you can see that there's a deeper shadow on that side of her nose. Now for me, I generally prefer a much softer softbox, and so I don't use the grid as much. And so in the rest of our examples, we're going to be showing you without the grid on them. But there are definitely places for the grid, especially if you're looking to do a much more dramatic light, but you still want it to be a soft and beautiful light. Use that grid. Okay, so we're going to, this is a funny example of using this actual softbox right here. So I had to create an album cover, and you go ahead and show it. This is the final photograph of the album cover. So we initially shot the room first, and I knew that I had this big window, and I knew that I was going to be putting something in a dress in that chair, and we decided on a goat. So this is, the album cover looks like this. It's by Kevin Burdick. It's called 13 Weddings, and it actually gets released today, so it's on iTunes. So if you want to go hear it, it's on iTunes right now. It's called 13 Weddings. But anyway, we have this big softbox right here, that window. And so I needed to light the goat, and I also needed to light the girl. So here's the girl. So we lit the girl with the same with this softbox right here. So this is the largest softbox, and it's sitting right off here to the right, and that's how we lit the girl at the same angle that the original light source was, which is the window. And then we lit the goat at the same angle as well, so that we could get that same feel of the way the room was lit. And then we combine all of them together, as well as a couple leg parts and stuff like that, and we get our album cover. So anyway, just a funny example of using that softbox. Okay, so now we're going to go back to our photo shoot here, and I'm going to show you the layout of this next one. And so we are right here. So this is the layout. We have a stone, and our model, our senior, is sitting on top of that stone. And we've taken the large softbox and we've literally got it pointing on axis to her, but I'm of course way over here. And she's going to be looking this way at me, which means that she's going to be kind of in a short light situation, because the bulk of the light's going to be on this side of her face, and I'm going to be looking at the opposite side of her face. And then we've got tree cover here. And the sun is somewhere behind the trees, so it's not actually striking her at all. The only hint that we're getting of the sun is all the light coming through the trees and the light that we get, out here where it's coming around the trees and hitting like the area around me where I'm shooting. You can see that it's really bright sunlight. We shot this part at the earliest part of the day, so it's like 3 o'clock, so it's really, really bright sun, and it's got lots of hot spots. But because we chose a nice shady place with all that light filtering through the trees, we are going to get a nice shaded area for us to sculpt her, but we get some nice speckled light in the background. Before we show the video though, go to this first shot inside of Lightroom. We first get an exposure on the background to make sure that we have everything under control. And so in here you can see that I've gotten the exposure. She's too dark, obviously, but the background looks perfect. I've got little specular highlights back there in the background. I've got all the detail in all the shadows that I want. So this is the perfect ambient exposure. And that ambient exposure ends up being, and you can always see what in the metadata what it is, or I can turn it on here. Hold on, there we go. So you can see here, there's the exposure. It's 1/60th of a second. Remember, we're keeping it at 1/60th of a second because we want to make sure that the sync is correct. You can go up to 1/200th of a second on the Mark III camera, which is what I'm using, but sometimes the Mark III isn't quite accurate on that, and so 1/60th is, it's a sure bet that I'm not going to get a sync problem and have half of the flash cut off by the curtain. So in this case, we get the ambient exposure first at 1/60th of a second at f3.5 at 200 ISO, and then we're going to add the light. Now in this case, what you're going to see is I'm going to get the light through TTL. And so I'm using the Air remote here, and on it you can see that I have TTL mode. So this top right hand button goes from TTL mode to manual mode. TTL to manual. So TTL is through the lens metering, and it's going to take a flash, it's going to look through the lens and see what that flash exposure was, and then it's going to make a determination based on what it sees in the background and what the flash was as to what that exposure should be. If I want to change that exposure, I need to go not here because I'm only using one light. So instead, instead of going into the remote here to change the exposure of the TTL, I'm actually going to go into the flash compensation button inside of my camera, and I'm going to dial that up. Can you see that? So I'm dialing up and down the flash inside of the camera, not on the Profoto Air remote. That is saved. Next month we'll talk a lot about the ratios and stuff we would use here. This is just communicating right now. And so what you're going to see us doing in this shot is we're going to get the exposure from the TTL. Once we have the exposure from the TTL, then I'm going to go in and I'm going to push that mode button right here. I'm going to go from TTL. As soon as I like it, I'm going to go from TTL to manual. And that's going to lock in the exposure that I've gotten from the TTL. So we first allow the TTL to do its job, adjust a little bit, see what we like, and as soon as we have that, once I hit that manual, then the settings that are on the actual B1 head lock in and stay there, so that no matter what my framing is, I can shoot away and the light's going to stay the same. And you'll see where that comes into play in just a second. So go ahead and play that video. And so I'm shooting here, and I'm getting the TTL from that, and this is the TTL that I get from it. And then, as we shoot, I lock that in by turning it to manual. And see, now pause that right there. If you look to the top right, there's a lot of light coming in from the top. And I love it. It's beautiful. I love the way it kind of filters down. But as a result of that light coming in, when I turned vertical, that would have changed the TTL to some degree. Now, the B1's pretty good about reading light. It doesn't get fooled very often, but that kind of a light change will definitely change how much light is going to be put in to the equation. And so by locking it in the first time, as soon as I like the light on my subject, then I lock it in, and then I can reframe and move around and keep that as a manual setting, even though I didn't have to do a lot of work to get the exposure setting in the first place on the flash. And so let's go into Lightroom and you'll see the difference between these shots then. So here is one of the shots that we get, and here is another, and so these are the 3 shots that we got in there, but you can see they're all very different. You've got a nice wide shot here, and the great thing about this large softbox is that it's literally so big that I can get a shot of just her, I can get like a headshot, I can get a nice wide shot, or I can get a full body shot, and my assistant doesn't have to do a lot of changing or maneuvering or anything like that because it's just such a big light source. So it's very beautiful that way. And then the last shot in this series that we want to show, go ahead and play it, and you'll see that we go from this to shoot another shot of her. So after we get this shot, we end up doing another shot of her standing in the pathway. And when we go to the pathway, because instead of just looking at backlight, see how we've changed the position of the flash? So instead of, pause that, instead of the flash being, and I'll show you on the diagram here, instead of the flash being here, we put the flash over here. And the reason that we put the flash over here was because instead of just specular lights coming behind there, you notice that there's that big monolith thing, like that little, I don't know what that is, but that little monolith thing is in the background of the shot. And it's being lit from this side because that's the only light can get through here, through the trees, and it's lighting on that side of the monolith. And so I want, in order to make it look like she's lit from the same light source, I want to then light this side of her instead of from this side. And so in any case where I find a natural light falling on backgrounds, I want to try and keep that same direction of light happening when I'm photographing so that she looks like she belongs in the shot. So that's that. Okay, we're going to go and look and see if we have any questions to be answered here. So let me just kind of scan here and see if we have any questions that need to be answered. And by the way, if you have questions, go ahead and chat them in. Let's see. Okay, the first question is, and this is back when we were talking about the bare head. What is the angle of light spread in the built-in reflector on the B1? And that's 77 degrees. let's see, the total spread is 180 degrees, but it looks like 77 degrees is the main light source, and then it starts dropping off outside of that. Okay, this is a good question. What is the power compared to the speed light? So if you take a speed light, little tiny light, super portable, and I totally understand the need for speed lights. Sometimes you're in a position where you literally have, a pocket to shove a speed light in, and you're out photographing, and you need to set it on like a, you just need to put it on a wall or something like that. And so it's a perfectly acceptable thing to do, and everything that we've been doing here we can do with a speed light. It's just the power is much less, and so the power is about 10 times more powerful. So really, it's like having 10 speed lights. So when you consider the amount of power that you get out of one B1 head, it's like buying a lot of speed lights. So in the end, it's about the same price to get the same power. Let's see. I know Nikon TTL is coming, but can you use the B1 with the Nikon today? Yeah, absolutely you can use the B1 with your Nikon. You just are going to be not using the TTL function of the light. But everything else will operate fine. You're just going to be changing it manually instead of TTL. And that doesn't mean you have to go dial it. You can still change it manually from the air remote. You just can't use the TTL function just yet. But it will happen. Can I use the B1 with my speed lights? Yes, absolutely. If you go fully manual, you can use the speed lights and the B1 all together. In fact, I do that quite often, where I need a little light under a desk somewhere to just throw in some light raking across the floor. That's a task for a small Canon speed light. So let's see. Oh, okay, so the question is, do you shoot bare head very often? And what are the benefits of a bare head? I shoot bare head occasionally. If I am running and gunning, where I just have to get something lit, yeah, I'll use bare head constantly, especially if I'm the only person on the job. So sometimes I'll do a senior portrait and I don't even have an assistant with me. And so when that's the case, and I need to run around, I will just carry the B1 here, and I'll take this, I'll barehead it, so I'm going to pull this off, and I will just put it on a small lull stand, and I'll just cart it like this and walk it around and set it somewhere and aim it where I need it to go and then fire. And it's a beautiful light. I've done a lot of amazing work, even front lighting someone with it. It does a great job, but I'll barehead like that all the time. But most of the time I find myself, when I'm doing barehead type work, I'm using it as a backlight. I'm using it to, fill in light. Like I shot a senior portrait where the girl was looking out of a building, like an old abandoned building. And so the light on the front was fine. Like she's out of this window, so you see this nice soft light from the sky. But then when you looked into the building, it was dark. It was just black. And so I took this and put it around the corner and lit the inside of the building so that then there was something to look at inside, and it became a very nice shot. So yeah, absolutely, I'll use this quite a bit. But usually it's for backlight and effect lighting, not as much for forward lighting. Okay, let's see. I'll answer one more here before we move on to our next. What lenses are you using? I am using mostly the 70-200 lens. It's the Mark II, so it's 70-200 Canon Mark II. It's 2.8, and it's got image stabilization on it. So that's my favorite portrait lens. I pretty much have that on all the time. The only time I go away from that is when I'm doing wider shots with the 24-70. The Mark II, again, the Mark I I've never really liked it. It's got some focusing issues and stuff. But the Mark II on both of those are very, very good good lenses. So that's what we're using. And most of the time I find I'm at like 70 or 100 or somewhere. I'm not zooming in with the 200 all the way to 200 generally. I'm usually using the wider side of that lens. But I prefer that lens to any other lens at 70 to 100. I would rather shoot with that lens than any other lens. So it's a very sharp lens. Okay, let's go on to our next setup. In this case, I just want to show you the angling a softbox, because I like to do that a lot rather than having it just vertical or just horizontal. So Matt, can you find that? And I'm going to pull in this softbox again, and I want to show you what I like to do with a softbox, big or small, but it works really well with a big softbox. So in this shot, go to Lightroom first, and let me just show you this shot. And there's two of them, but they're both using the same principle. It's just on this one she's turning to the left, and on this one she's turning to the right, so you see a little bit more of the lighting. And so basically what we're doing is we're lighting one side of her face a lot, and then we're wrapping it around the other side of her face. But rather than using the entire softbox to do that, let me just show you this. See that? We got that nice light on this side of her face, but we're keeping this side of her hair fairly dark. We're getting a nice shadow on this side of her arm, so we're only lighting a little bit of her arm, which gives her a nice sleek arm. Those types of things are all a result of how much you allow that light to wrap around. And so go ahead and play the video and watch. It's very short, but see how I've got the thing angled at about a 45, and then I'm shooting very close to that. And so what's happening is the light is, instead of taking the, oh, I'm stuck on the, there we go. I'm stuck on the stand. There we go. Instead of doing this, where the light would wrap really far around her, what I'm doing, or instead of doing it in vertical, where it would just kind of, my softbox is so huge that it is hitting the stand a little bit. So you see how I'm doing this? I'm going to bring this down a little bit so you can see. There. So what I'm doing is I'm angling it so that the bulk of the flash is hitting her on that left-hand side of her face. And then this part of the flash is what's wrapping around the face. And so then if I'm here like this, shooting at that corner, or even here, this is what's wrapping around. So it's like the bulk of your light is on one side of her face, and only this corner is getting that final reach around. And so play around with that, how much you tilt that, and you can decide how much light is. It's almost like having a big softbox on one side and a little softbox further over, kind of in the middle or on the other side. And so I like doing that a lot. Most of the time when I'm shooting one person, I'm shooting with a tilted softbox like that rather than straight up or horizontal. So I like doing that. I do it a lot, and I think it's a valuable thing to know how to do. So play around with it and see what you think, but I think you'll find that you can do some interesting stuff. It's very subtle, but it gives you a much nicer wrap, and it gives you a softer look on the other side. Okay, we're going to go to the last shot that we did this day, and it is a shot of a Jeep in front of the city, because she bought this Jeep. She loves this Jeep. I love the Jeep. I wish I had the Jeep. And so we were really excited about this Jeep. Hey, Matt, could you play the time lapse? I just want you to see how the sun is going down really fast. And so just see how that sky is getting darker and darker and darker and bluer and purple, and see that? There. That's what we had to work with. So we got there right as the sun was setting. And so in this shot, let me find this shot here. Yep, there we are. So we got the city, awesome city. Here's the Jeep, and she's going to be on the Jeep here, in the final shot at least. She's going to be on the Jeep here. We have the flash in 3 different places during this photo shoot on the Jeep. The first place we have it is here. And the reason we have it, and this is my sun. This means that the sun is there, but it's below the horizon already. So it's just like we have a little bit of sun, but it's mostly hitting the buildings here, and it's not hitting her. This was in shade the whole time that we were photographing. But there's a nice directional light coming from this sky here, because it's a pretty bright sky still. And so that light is lighting her, and you can see on this first shot inside of Lightroom, you can see that she's well lit. This is no flash, it's just the sky. So that's what's lighting her in this shot. And so what we do then, the reason we put the flash here, the reason we put our softbox here, is because my general mantra is follow the light source. And I talked about that last month in our webinar, where you follow the light source. Whatever the light source is doing, you start from there and then wrap it around a little further so that it looks very, very natural. So in that case, we started following the light source, and we just augmented the light that was coming from the sun, because we were getting a certain direction on the light, and we were getting that light direction up here on the buildings, but she was a little too dark for it to look great, because she was in shadow. This whole area was in shadow. And so if you look here in Lightroom, then you can see that we go to light from that side. And oh well, hold on, I don't have that one in there. Oh well, but that's our initial plan, is to light from that side. The next thing that we did, though, is we decided that we would try and pop her out. And I wanted to show you the difference between lighting for a natural situation versus lighting the opposite of natural. And so the light on these buildings is coming from this side. It's over here, the sky is over here, and you're going to see light coming on this side of the buildings. So there'll be shadow on this side of the building, light on this side of the building. And so what we did is we took our softbox and we put it over here, so that we could create the opposite. So now the light source is going to be opposite. If you look here in Lightroom, you'll see that these buildings are being lit from the right side. There's the light, there's the shadow. But if you look at her, we're lighting her, here's the light, here's the shadow, so she's opposite. And what happens is it makes her pop out of the scene a little bit more. So when you want someone to jump out of the scene, you want a super three-dimensional feel where it just jumps out. If you light them from the opposite side as to what the background's being lit, then you'll find that they'll jump out, because your mind's looking at the two and they're incongruous. They don't make sense together. And so you've got this, person who's lit from the wrong source or side, and they pop out at you because your mind can't. It looks at the two and says, that doesn't work out. That doesn't look right. And so what we did then is we took this, and I'm going to show you the final shot just so you can see what we ended up with. The idea is that we had to wait, and everything's on a tripod. So go ahead and play the video of us shooting this final shot here. But everything's on a tripod. So I start out just shooting her just for fun, but notice I'm on a tripod there. Okay? So the tripod is there because I know at one point I'm going to be shooting at a fairly low shutter speed. And in this instance, my shutter speed is 1/60th of a second at f4 when I shoot the final shot at ISO 400. And so you got to stay on a tripod for that, because otherwise I'm shooting a long lens. And so, and by the way, Paul is over there as well fanning her. That's not because it's hot, and it's not a lighting technique, and I'm not trying to get hair blow. I'm just there's gnats all over, and so we're trying to keep the gnats from eating her alive. And so here we are now in the final shot, and you can see, pause that. Oh, go back a little bit. So there, there. Okay, you can see that our city is now still being lit from a direction. So we still have a natural direction of light, but the sun has gone down so that we get that beautiful, beautiful blue kind of purpley sky. We're getting a little bit of light coming from the buildings where they're actually starting to turn on their lights and stuff, and we're starting to see those. And then we are lighting her from the opposite side, and we're photographing this at 1/60th of a second on a tripod. And there's two reasons for the tripod. The first reason for the tripod is obviously that we're at a slow shutter speed. But the second reason for this, the tripod is that after the shot has been taken, I slow down the shutter speed to 1/25th of a second and take another shot so that I can get a little bit more detail on the rest of the Jeep, because I want to get more detail on the sides of the Jeep as well, because it's pretty dark. So look here at our at Lightroom, and I'll show you the difference between. So this is the original. This is the shot that we took, but this is the original shot. See how dark that side of the Jeep is? And I've only got one light source, and so I'm lighting her up with that light source, and then this side of the Jeep is dark. So I take a second shot right after the shot, and there's the Jeep right there. Now I've got the information I want on the Jeep that I can kind of paint in. And so when I combine the two, when I open them both in Photoshop and layer them, then I get this. Do you see how I got some extra information there? Oh, and by the way, those lights weren't on. Remember, you can look at that. They're off. You can turn them on just by overexposing them. So you just paint in overexposure, and I just turned on the lights. We forgot to turn on the lights on the Jeep, so we just turned them on in Lightroom. But it's very easy to do. Just simply go into your, here I'll show you really quickly just so you can see. You simply go into your paint tool, and you take the exposure all the way up and the highlights all the way up and the shadows all the way up, and then you just start painting away and things will just start turning on. So I just turn on all the lights. So that's a useful tool when you forget to turn on a light while you're shooting. But that's the final shot. It's important to note that there is a reflection of our softbox here inside of the Jeep. If you look at the original exposure on it, you'll see that it's much worse. It's much brighter. But then when I take the shot without the flash, all there is a shadow of that softbox. And so then when I combine the two, I get a much softer reflection off of that. So it was also useful to get rid of the reflection from the softbox to some degree. I could have worked harder on that, but it is a senior portrait after all. It's not. I'm not selling the Jeep. I'm focusing on the girl. So, and I think she looks great. And then of course we finished off the night in our third position of the light, which is right here. We just moved the softbox over and closer to her because I was just getting really close to her to get the final shot of the evening, and that is this one right here. So those are the ways that we use one light. If I can, I try and get a softbox. The softbox is my favorite light source. If I can't do that, if it's too windy or whatever, I'll try and minimize the size of the softbox. Or an umbrella is a great way to do it, or a beauty dish. A beauty dish is a great way to get beautiful soft light on location without having to lug around a big softbox. But in our case, we use the softbox, we use the telezoom, and then we bareheaded it. And all three were great. It's just a matter of using them in different ways. Think about the way you're using the lights. Don't always think that you have to use it for the front light. And of course, get that light off of the camera and get it more to the right or to the left so that you get some shape to your images. Let's see, we've got one more minute. Again, feel free to join us on the next workshop, and it is on June 18th. It is at the same time. And we will see you there with two lights this time. We're going to be going on location with two B1 heads, which incidentally there is an awesome new kit with two B1 heads in it. So check that out at profoto.com. Fantastic little backpack that it comes in. You can carry the whole kit with you. It has places for all sorts of cool things, like I can put a tripod on it, or I can put an umbrella with it, things like that. So it's a great little backpack. And if you want to follow Profoto, remember you can go to their Twitter or you can go to their Facebook, facebook.com/Profoto and @Profoto, and then Profoto USA as well. And to follow me, you can go to jaredplatt.com. You can also find me on Creative Live in June, as well as if you're international or want to be traveling international, meet me in Barcelona in October, and we'll have some great fun with some Profoto lighting equipment and teach you how to do some great street photography with minimal gear. And that is all we have time for today, but thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you next month with 2 light sources on location. Looking forward to it. It's going to be a cool photo shoot. See you then.